Welcome to Amplifying the Patient Journey, a series in which we speak with both providers and patients about the clinical journey with a neurologic condition and what recent advances mean for patients, their providers, and caregivers. In this episode, Practical Neurology's editor-in-chief, Joe Rusco, interviews Elisabeth Beraquit, a Philadelphian, CPA, and former bakery owner who recounts her painstaking journey of recovery from a traumatic brain injury due to a 30-foot fall.
If you could give us a brief overview of your very unique traumatic brain injury, along with some other injuries at the same time.
Of course, sure. I was a student in Boston at the time, and I had grown up going to Boston and going to my dad was a lifelong Red Sox fan, so we went to Fenway a lot as I grew up, and that actually made me want to go to school in Boston. And I applied early decision to Boston University and was like, if I don't get in there, I don't know where I'm going, but I have to go there. So on my graduation night, it was appropriate that we had tickets to go to a Fenway game that our friends in town got us. So my whole family, my 3 sisters and their husbands and their kids all went over to the park and watched the game together. It was a really nice time. And we were at the end of the game, we were headed towards the elevator to head home for the night. And my dad and I were I was like jumping on his back to hug him in a loving way. We were all just happy and celebrating. And I came down from his back and knocked into the elevator door. I don't think there was a ton of impact. It was just kind of like, as I hit it lightly, the door opened up like a doggy door. And then I fell into the shaft and it slammed shut. So my dad and my sister turned around and they were just like, where did she go? What happened? And so my sister immediately ran downstairs to make sure no one was pressing the button or turning the elevator, making it move. And my brother-in-law's contacted the staff of the park to shut power off to the elevator. It turns out I was on top of the elevator car that was on the first floor, and we were on the 4th floor. So I fell about 30 feet on top of the elevator shaft. The park was great with getting me out of there. They had the power shut off pretty immediately, and then the EMTs and Boston police came and basically hoisted themselves down into the shaft on top of the elevator car and were able to get me out through the door on the 2nd floor, I think. But it was about 30 minutes in there. And when they got to me, I was breathing on my own, but I wasn't conscious. So they got me in an elevator or in an ambulance over to Beth Israel Hospital, which is like 5 minutes away. And when I got there, they put me on a breathing tube in case I did lose that ability, and they sedated me while I was on that breathing tube for comfort. And from there, they evaluated my injuries and determined that I had a few shattered teeth, a shattered jaw, some facial fractures, some bone fractures in my back, and then I had a few brain injuries on my right hemisphere. So there was blood outside of the brain, fluid inside the spaces of the brain, and then tearing of the brain fibers. But they kept me on sedation for a few days just to kind of keep me comfortable. And I remained in induced coma for 5 days from there.
It's a lot of injuries there. It's a very dramatic and horrible case that you experienced there, but you look so healthy right now. So tell me a little bit about the recovery journey, because it was a process, took place in both Boston and down in the Philadelphia area. And there were lots of different players and involved, not only from the healthcare perspective, but from your social network as well. So,
Of course. So I spent 2 weeks at Beth Israel, and from there I went over to Spalding Rehab Hospital, it was like a brand new hospital facility then. They had opened it a year before for the bombing victims of the marathon bombing. So it was brand new, and they had a lot of like new technologies that they could like handle this best. So originally the idea was to try and fly me home from Boston because I'm from South Jersey, and my parents and family were like, we can't be around you. We have to go back to work. Like, how are we going to make this work? So they were going to try and fly me home, but the care up in Boston was basically unmatched. Kind of.
so you have a lot of concentration of experts right there. So how many years are we talking about?
The actual like therapy of the rehab was only 3 months total, I think. So after doing 2 weeks at Beth Israel, I went to Spalding and I spent less than a month there. But the intensive care felt like I was there for probably 3 months. I was doing therapies every single day, speech, occupation, and PT, and living I was living there. So I was just, anything I did was, okay, we'll do a group activity where we do ride a bike or like a sit down bike kind of thing. But I was there until the end of June. And then I came home to South Jersey and I continued at Bacharach I think it's in Absecon, New Jersey. And I was there for the remaining 2 months of summer. I did 3 days a week, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I did PT, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech every time that I was there. While I was doing that, I was having some evaluations, like neuropsych evaluations, to see how the therapy was progressing me and how I was recovering, basically. But by the end of the summer, I was as far as they could take me with therapy. But from the neuropsych evaluations, I was being determined that I was still processing at a more delayed level, and I had some delays to my executive functioning. So I wasn't ready to like go back to start work or anything at that point. So in the fall, I started getting some side jobs to kind of help test myself and make myself you only get better by practice. So I was working as a secretary at a vet hospital. I was working at with the tax preparer as her assistant and working as an administrative assistant somewhere else. And I was studying for the CPA at the same time, just kind of like throwing whatever I could at myself and seeing if I could make it work. And so I did that for until May of the following year. So I did that for the entire winter and then the first few months of the following year. And I took my CPA exam in February of the following year, and I passed that, I found out in May. So I was like, if I pass this, I'm ready to move on to the next step of my life. And I wasn't hearing any more about, you're still delayed. I was like, nope, I'm good to go now.
Those type of cognitive challenges, in addition and variety, were really forcing you to heal, I guess, or encouraging plasticity, I guess. You rather than just wait on the sidelines until you recovered, you were kind of really actively challenging yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
If you had to look back at what was a highlight experience in terms of healthcare providers? You mentioned how caring some of the nurses were in taking care of your, physical body, which was important. And it wasn't just, drawing blood or taking your blood pressure. So any other highlights that people should know about?
Yeah, the nurses at Beth Israel were like really on top of, they just saw me as like a person. I don't know if they like they just saw me as like their sister or daughter coming out of college, and like treated me like they would want theirs to be treated. And same with my family. They were just like there for them and did whatever they could to make the journey easier. Um, Another thing was the nurses at Spalding kind of had the same perspective, and they really focused on like helping me find myself, and not just focusing on like, well, she needs to learn how to cook macaroni, or she needs to learn how to walk properly again. But like they were like, okay, this girl is waking up, she does not remember the last 3 months, 3 to 5 months of her life, and she has a really bad short-term memory. So we need to help her understand who she was before this accident and what happened to her. So I think they were definitely the most incremental people in my healing process.
And not just to consider a deliverable like, oh, you can ambulate or you can use a pen successfully, but more about personal speaking to you as a person. What about anything, if you could look back, that you wish you had broached or brought up with anyone, or you felt like, oh, I shouldn't say this, or not to, I'm not trying to get you to confess like, oh, I really dislike this one nurse, but just something that could, I think that when you see different specialists, sometimes we say, oh, I wish my orthopedic or oral mech surgeon was more like my neurologist, or was more.
There were definitely some doctors who meant business and were really good at what they did, but they probably should have a buffer and have someone else speaking for them, because we were just like, that's really rough. My sister is she was a med student at the time, and so she was at the forefront, kind of like, oh, I know what this is, I know what this is. And one doctor she pinned, and she was like, oh, I don't like him. Like, he is just too blunt and too like rude. Other doctors were great, but like, I won't mention any names. But
Is it a matter of explaining certain terms or using too much jargon? Because that happens a lot in terms of like alphabet soup sometimes with all the acronyms.
using too much jargon, and also just kind of speaking like they're above you, and like it was just kind of like, okay, maybe I don't understand this well, but you're not like that much smarter than me in every aspect of life. Like, I'm a person too, kind of thing.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
That was like more my family than me at all. Like, I was very unaware at this time.
What about your family network? Tell me a little bit about how important that family network and friends and family were.
They The family network I had was so crucial. I had a lot of people come visit, especially like my dad had therapists he knew in Boston from when he went to like I can't think of the school he went to, but when he went to school when he was younger, and like they came to visit, and all of my family friends came to visit or sent packages with like mind games for me to play with. My dad was a minister in a town in South Jersey. And so when people heard he was in this terrible situation with his daughter, they just like poured out love and support for our family. And when they heard that I might not be able to come home because it was so costly to like fly medically, they donated like a lot of money toward to my case and my healthcare, and they were just so supportive. And I can't begin to say how important like the support of your family and friends is.
That's great. Thank you. Any specific tactics? So I like your description of how the speech pathologist, and I believe that was correct, maybe I'm incorrect, used music to help you kind of regain some function there. Were there any other tactics? You mentioned baking and different things that you were doing, and you mentioned earlier bike riding. So any specific tactics that, say that someone else was going through similar experience, what was a good tactic here?
So tactics wise, I would say the opportunity to definitely bake and they had these kitchen spaces in Spalding where we would go in there and just do the whole thing, monitor like the entire baking process being monitored. We made chocolate chip cookies on my first time in there, I think. But also the speech pathologists had such an impact. Like I wasn't speaking at all before, and they just pulled out a guitar and started like humming along with me and teaching me to like breathe through humming. And then they just got me to start singing a Taylor Swift song. And they like, I don't know if someone gave them a hint that I'm a big Swiftie, but it just like hit. And I was just singing.
Perfect. Yeah.
The
So
next day,
now,
my mom.
how do you stay focused and motivated? And you had a lot going on, and other people, they may give up.
I have to say, I feel like I was I don't know. I look back on it and I feel like I was very out of it at the time because I was just like so like focused on getting better and not really like seeing anything else. But I think that having an end goal was really helpful. I had a job promised for me in Philadelphia at PricewaterhouseCooper, and I think I was just working towards getting better so that I could start that. I mean, I was stressed because I asked them to extend that offer like 6 months from the original offer, and they did that. And then I was like, oh, I have to meet this offer. Like, I have to get ready and get better. And so when I went to the neuro evaluations and they told me I wasn't functioning as well as I had hoped, I was like, oh, I have to push that again. So it was just constant like something to strive for was that. And the other thing was I just graduated college and I ended up living at my parents' house again. At first, I didn't have a car or at first I didn't have a license because of my vision was messed up. And so just like it was totally a setback that I just been out of the house for 4 years in Boston doing everything on my own. And now I'm back living in my parents' house. And I think the goal to not only go out and work for PwC, it was to get a job in Philly and have an apartment in Philly. That was like the next step kind of thing. So I was just really focused on that.
Perfect. Yeah, you mentioned having a goal, but a real purpose too, and wanting to regain that independence. So those three really important features. So thank you for sharing that. Anything else that could have been done differently?
I have a very unique situation, so I don't want to discredit any of my healthcare providers, but having care starting in Boston and then coming down to South Jersey and having care continue, but with different doctors that didn't know from the beginning of the process how everything progressed was very difficult because I started with 5 days. People in the healthcare providers in Boston saw how bad it was. And once I got to Philly, it was kind of like just churn. And once I got to South Jersey, it just was kind of like churning me out. And I reached the point of I couldn't have any more help from therapists in South Jersey. And it was just kind of like, okay, see you later. And I was just like, I'm not ready to navigate this on my own. And even like today, I wish that I had more follow up with doctors about how it could impact me in other ways throughout the rest of my life. And I think that the after recovery follow up and care is something that is very vital and maybe missing if this situation is not just unique to me. The other thing I thought about was a brain injury specific therapist, like resources for patients about therapists that are specific to brain injury, because I found myself, I actually went to 3 different therapists after my accident because everyone was telling me, you should go talk about that. You should go talk about that. And each one of them got to a point where they were like, we had like our session, our meet and greet session where they would get to know me and talk to me for a little bit. And then we'd get to a point where they'd just kind of be like, okay, so what are you here for? And what do you want to work on? And it was not knowing what I needed to work on, not knowing what was underneath the surface and what I needed to recognize, because I had just gone through this terrible accident. I look back and I'm like, I wish I had the foresight to be like, I just experienced this terrible thing. My life is in shambles. What do you mean? What do I need to work on?
What about the available patient resources that are available?
I didn't explore group therapy or support groups very much. I remember I think this is why I was deterred by doing that. I was in an evaluation one time and another patient came in and they had just fallen down the stairs somewhere and they were so much further behind on their recovery, and it had happened a long time before mine. Like the period of recovery was a lot different. His was a lot longer than mine, and I just saw the huge discrepancies between our recoveries, and I was kind of, along with my family, we were all kind of worried I would be discouraged by going to support groups because brain injuries can have such a different impact on everyone. I definitely think that some patients need them and there is a place for them, but I think, yeah, I think in aftermath, it might be good to like talk to other people who have gone through them, but during the time of recovery, it was difficult to do that.
That's another really good point about one size doesn't fit all, in terms of if you are elderly and in a nursing home and have a fall and an injury and are part of that population, your experience and support group will be quite different than someone in your situation or a veteran, say, who has experience. Yeah. So they're different pathways. And so it's not one size fits all, I guess. You mentioned really challenging yourself in terms of having a goal and studying for exams and using games and music and baking and those type of activities. What about other type of lifestyle things like diet and exercise and sleep? Anything you could comment on that?
So when I talked about the support of my hometown, one person actually owned a gym in our hometown. So when I got home, they gifted me a membership for the year or the summer, I'm not sure, but I was going to the gym every day and I started becoming a runner. I couldn't run a mile in middle school without huffing and puffing, but I decided to just start running, and it really helps with getting a lot of just like emotions out of the system by just doing that. I continued to do that through a few years ago. I've stopped running now, but it was just a really good source of exercise and getting emotions up.
Realizing that everyone's experience is different, but if you had to give some general advice to someone who has a similar experience, even though it's most likely very rare what you encountered, right? What would you say to friends and family about your experience and what they can expect and what advice would you give them?
Yeah, of course. I would just keep trying and setting goals, mini goals for yourself to like reach and achieve and feel great about them, and then set another goal and kind of just keep going. And also to the family of um, others that go through this, I would say try to give them the most normalcy as possible. I know everyone wants to kind of, for lack of a better term, baby you because you have an injury. But if you just treat them as normal as possible, it kind of brings them out of it. I think that one early on, I was given my phone back, and they like broke into my phone because I didn't remember any of my passwords, and I was able to just text people. And it was such a like awakening thing to be able to communicate with other people. And I just think that that was such a huge thing for me. I couldn't even talk yet, but I could text, and it was a very, I forgot to mention it earlier, but it was a very big moment. So I think just acting as normal as possible under the circumstances would be the best thing for the person that's going through this.
That's a great point.
Thank you to Elisabeth Beraquit for sharing her story and knowledge with our listeners in this episode of Amplifying the Patient Journey. And thanks to you, our listeners. Be sure to visit practicalneurology.com for more podcasts in the neurology field.